Hello, hello. Greetings, everybody. Welcome. This is the Robert Ferris Thompson Maroon Institute for Afro-Diasporic Arts, and we are at Salon number 6 today, and we have two special guests, Marta Moreno Vega, in conversation with C. Daniel Dawson, who is the co-director of the Institute, and Adama Delphine Fawundu. And the two presentations are titled The Multidisciplinary Aesthetic Vision of Master T, the Flash. That's Marta's talk, actually in dialogue with Danny Dawson, and Vibrations from the Deep, Ancestral Wisdom and Art Making by Adama Delphine Fawundu. So just before we get started, I'd like to again officially welcome everybody. I'm Petra Richterová. I'm the founding director of the Robert Ferris Thompson Maroon Institute for Afro-Diasporic Arts. And we have monthly salons that feature conversations between artists and scholars that need to be had. So we are having them. And we are joined today by C. Daniel Dawson, the co-director of the Institute, as well as Henry Druhl, who is a senior advisor who will kind of usher in our Q&A section at the very end of the program. And we have Marta Moreno Vega as a presenter, but also she is on the advisory board of the Institute. So it is such a pleasure to be here today. So let me jump right into it by way of introduction. So, renowned scholar, institution builder, and Yoruba priestess, Dr. Marta Moreno Vega brings foundational knowledge of African diasporic spiritual systems, particularly Yoruba-based traditions in the Americas. Her work bridges scholarship, spirituality, and community empowerment. Marta will be in conversation with C. Daniel Dawson discussing the Caribbean Cultural Center's collaboration with Robert Ferris Thompson. Multidisciplinary visual artist, scholar, and professor Adama Delphine Fawundu brings to life sacred African feminine archetypes using an Afrofuturist orientation. Through photography, film, and performance, she reinterprets African spirituality. Their conversation will center on embodiment, ritual knowledge, and visual sovereignty. So the format will be that Dr. Vega will start, then we'll go directly to Adama, and then we'll have the two guests dialogue. And towards the end of our session today, we'll open up to Q&A to the guests that are here. So Dr. Vega and Danny, anytime you're ready, we are ready.
Well,
Let her rip.
thank you for the invitation and the team that has been working on the series as well. Um, it's an honor to be part of the discussions that are happening. Rather than a formal presentation, when I started thinking about Robert Farris Thompson, I felt that it was important to enter into a conversation with Danny because a lot of what work we did with Robert Farris Thompson included Danny. Although I met Farris Thompson early on when I started the Caribbean Cultural Center. I was then doing my doctorate at Columbia University in anthropology and found it wanting, right? In terms of understanding African traditions, African diaspora traditions, looking at the Caribbean, looking at Puerto Rico, where I am now, and saw myself missing from the discussions in my classes. So I started visiting the Schomburg Center and just sitting there and going through all the books and going through all of the material because I had this notion of the importance of us in New York City, right? And the diversity that we represented in New York City. So I was trying to figure out how do I represent that in an institution? in a cultural institution, in the way that we enter the world and practice in the world, the way that we understand who we are, not only in terms of ethnic and national IDs, but that we are interconnected because of the experience we went and had been through, right? Not only as the process of enslavement, but the interaction between different ethnic groups in the root tradition of Africa itself. So I had the honor, right, of beginning to sort of explore my spirituality as well, because my grandmother was a spiritist. And we had that as a normal way in my family of being. The understanding, the spirit was also a part of the reality that we were living on a daily basis. And those ancestral spirits were important in moving forward. So I was trying to figure out, how does my scholarship, right, interact with my spirituality, because they're not in my head, separate. And in that process, I met a priestess, Angela Fontanes, a daughter of Yemaya, and you're all in blue, and so is Delphine. In terms of understanding spirituality, and the first exhibition, one of the first exhibitions that was done when I was director of the Caribbean Cultural Center, was Santeria y Vudú, because I understood that in New York City, the importance of the Cuban, Puerto Rican traditions, as well as the traditions of the Haitian community, was seen, right, by us, but not necessarily seen, right, by a broader community or nor understood. So the first exhibition that we planned was that. And Angela was a part of that, and also brought in the expertise of Julito Collazo. And Julito Collazo was a master drummer of the Yoruba tradition in Cuba, as was este, um, Francisco Aguabella, and he were friends. And who brings them into New York City? But Catherine Dunham. So that when we're looking at, and I'm looking at, how do you bridge these experiences, these intelligences, I meet Julito Collazo. So I start talking to him about the exhibition that we're going to do and the importance of making this connection. And he's like, girl, please meet Robbie Farris Thompson. And I'm like, okay, I didn't know who he was. So he starts talking to me about Robbie Farris Thompson. And the importance of it was that Robbie Farris Thompson had been a student of Julito Collazo for years. So they were not only exchanging ritual information, but also the understanding of that interconnection between what was happening in Cuba, but how it got there, right? And the traditions that come in with the Abakwa, with the different ethnic realities that Africa brought into the Americas. So when I meet Robert Farris Thompson, I'm beyond excited, right? Because then I'm understanding, not only does Julito and Francisco Aguabella work with Thompson, but who brings them into being invited into New York? But Catherine Dunham. So that when you look at Catherine Dunham's work, and you understand Thompson's work, and you understand the work that Julito and Francisco Aguabella were doing, mambo at the Palladium, right? And ritual at home. So that connection and that lack of division was what I was looking for, and not understanding going to Columbia University, right? But understanding through the work of Thompson and the work of Julito Collazo and other musicians that were in this sphere of the popular and the sacred, and understanding that they were connected and not divided. So the work of the center, as I begin to develop it, reflects that understanding. And that sort of bringing together those varied elements of who we are as a people, not only aesthetically, but in the manifestation of the daily and how we negotiate it without division. And in that process, I meet Danny Dawson. And I'm not sure how I met you, Danny, but we came together at some point. I think it was in Brazil.
No, but I met you at that exhibit.
You came to the exhibit?
Yeah.
Uh, so then we met, but we didn't really
We
know each
didn't really
other.
know each other and didn't talk. Yeah.
Yeah. So the exhibition, Santeria and Voodoo, was really interesting because when people began to hear about it, I began getting very negative calls from our own community. Our own community was sending messages of, this is devil worship, you're a devil worshiper. Um, at that point, I had just initiated into the Yoruba tradition in Cuba. And so I was dressed in the initiation ceremonial dress. And I could get that in the streets if I walked around in Harlem or El Barrio. And I would also get it on the phone at my job, right? Developing the Caribbean Cultural Center as people kept negating what I was doing. But we did the exhibition. And what happened with that exhibition in there, I called the name also of um, the Haitian scholar,
Oh, Henry Frank. Henry Frank.
Henry Frank, and Julito, and Angela Fontanes. And the combination of the discussion of them and putting together the exhibition was like being at a university because we would go to museums to borrow objects, and we were told that we could not because these objects not only were special and unique and important, but our institution was not. And we could not hold on to those objects. But then a very interesting thing happened as I was getting unhappy with the rejection and trying to find ways of fighting it. Henry Frank and Julito Collazo said something that uh, changed my way of thinking about the work that I would be doing. And they said, you don't want those objects. Those objects belong in the graves of the traditional leaders that created it and the communities that created it. You don't want objects in your institution with the blood of our people because they belong where they are. Oh, they were. They don't belong in these institutions. And the conversation that happened between the curator and Julito and Henry Frank was very important because Julito would see an object and cross his hands across his chest. And the curator was busy saying how incredible this object was carved, how beautiful the headdress was, the mask was, and so on and so forth. And Julito would say, "We don't want it. We don't want it." In a very polite way, but he would keep his hands crossed, as did Henry Frank. Henry Frank was at the Museum of Natural History, and he also said the same thing. He says, we have those objects at the museum, but they don't belong there. And we know they don't belong there. But if I could protect them, I would. So that changes the narrative. And we have to understand that when we talk about Thompson, he changes a narrative that is very important for us as developing artists, curators, cultural workers, however you want to term us. Because I began to see the objects differently and the understanding historically how those objects should not have been in those institutions and in fact were stolen from where they were and brought into places to be admired but not seen as they should be. And I think the movie Wakanda makes a reference to it when one of the actors goes before a display and crosses his hands as well and gets very angry at the fact that that object is in the museum or the place he's in. So all of that to say that Thompson influenced me in ways that I didn't expect, because I was coming out with a narrative and understanding of art from what the university says at the time. And my heart and my experience at home said a different thing. That altar that was in my home, that was with objects that were similar to the ones that were in the museum, meant something different to my family than they did in that institution. And also that we had to see and develop a narrative based on the way that we understood art, or whatever art is, and incorporate it into whatever we do, not as an object away from life, but as an object as part of life. So Danny has some of the pieces that we did. That first exhibition, as I said, was voodoo, was Santeria and voodoo, and then from there we kept growing.
Okay, Marta, should I say something right now?
Yeah, go ahead.
Because I think, first of all, I think you're kind of modest, because when you talked about Caribbean Cultural Center, before that was El Museo del Barrio. You took a closet of supplies and made it into a world-class museum. Then you started the Association of Hispanic Art, and then you started the Caribbean Cultural Center African Diaspora Institute. So where I actually was your slave for 10 years. You know,
that's cold.
My forever employer. No, but it was actually one of the most incredible experiences, because you see the life you live being fulfilled in a manner that you would not in other institutions. And like we didn't have to have discussion about things we wanted to do, because we all wanted to do the same thing. So it wasn't whether it was valid, it was just how are we going to do it. But anyway, I can start with some of the things that we also celebrated Bob Thompson very early on too. I'll show you some of that too.
I'll show the image too of Julito, because
which goes over there.
Julito was very important and often forgotten in the story of Thompson.
Okay. Can everybody see that now too?
Yeah, I could see it from
here. Yes, yes. But I think you had the title slide too.
There's the title slide. Yep.
Yeah, we want to see that. So.
And I consider the reason I use the flash of the spirit, borrowed from Master T, is that the flash of the spirit to me in the journey that I have gone through and gone through with others, is that the flash of the spirit is our humanity, is our understanding of the need of our human spirit, of the breath that we bring to whatever object that activates it. And without that humanity, there is no art, there is no culture, there is no intelligence, because it is that breath that makes things come alive. And I think that's very important as people are beginning to try to use, and Delphine and I were having that discussion, artificial intelligence as intelligence, right? We're looking at the humanity of us, the breath of us, as being that flash of the spirit that keeps us alive, and
Marta,
to destroy that.
That's part of the problem too, because I think others recognize that, and there's an incredible jealousy because of our unending humanity and under the most dire situation. So I think that has caused just as much jealousy as it caused, admiration. But this is when we first celebrated Dr. Thompson at City College.
But we had already done work with him before that.
Yes, well before that, yeah.
Celebration, yeah.
And this is Julito Collazo. In fact, you met Thompson through Julito, and I met Julito through Thompson. And for those who don't know, Julito was a master drummer from Cuba. His mother was one of the most famous priestesses of Yemaya in Cuba. But he was also brought here by Catherine Dunham when she brought many major musicians from all over the African diaspora. One of the first songs we did where Thompson wrote the essay for this 1986 exhibit we did at Schomburg Center. One of the great Afro-Brazilian artists, Mestre Didi, was also in the show. Another show we did where Thompson wrote the text. It was for, he wrote the article, Art of Manuel Vega, from one of the first shows we did with Manny, who's a Puerto Rican artist initiated in Cuba, in Brazil. That's the original postcard for it. Another exhibit that we did was Dancing Between Two Worlds. I think Ken Dostler, who's one of the people here, was one who came up with the title for Dancing Between Two Worlds, Congo, Angola culture and the Americas. But it was also featured Fukiao and it featured Thompson. And it was a conference we also held at the Schomburg, which brought scholars together from Cuba, from Brazil, from the Congo.
Yeah, and I think that influence of Thompson and Flash of the Spirit, right?
Exactly.
Understanding that we were from one tree was very important because it was not only articulating it and saying it as a scholar, right? But it was actually seeing the exchange. And I think that one of the moments that I would say was the flash of the spirit was when we had a conference that Thompson was part of, Julito was part of, a brother from Panama, Henry Frank. They started singing, and Juan de Abimbola was there, and we were in a space that Didi DeSantis was saying with Juan Albain de Santos, his wife, and they started singing to Julito started singing to Shango, the Orisha of his head, and Didi joined Julito. And then Wandy joined the song. So that in that moment, four different, experience or cultural experiences came together. And in that moment, we understood that we were the continuum of a process that had left Africa, right? Forcibly left Africa. But we had created Africa outside of the motherland. So that moment was what created the international conference we did in Ife in 1981.
It's really funny, Marta. At this conference, too, the one Dancing Between Two Worlds, Congo, Angola culture and the Americas, the same type of thing happened when we had Enriquito Hernandez from Guanabacoa, Cuba, singing Apollo song, and Fukiao was translating the songs. So it's, I mean,
that was the idea, and that's how we began to develop exhibitions with that exchange, intentional.
It was really funny too because we had the people from Martinique doing Laja, and then you suggested having the Capoeira Angola follow Laja immediately, so there could be a direct comparison. It was one of the beautiful moments in my life too.
Yeah, no, those moments were magical. They were magical because all of a sudden we understood we were not that far apart. And history tries to make us far apart or disconnected. And that's not the case.
One other show that we did at the Caribbean Culture Center with a Uruguayan painter, Ruben Gayoza, Candomblé, Cayenge, and Consciousness. And Bob also wrote the essay for this. And this is actually his catalog for the exhibit. And that's really funny because you find out the word candomblé from Uruguay and Argentina is actually another version of the word candomblé from Brazil, when they represent really ancestral veneration. Another exhibit we did where Thompson wrote the essay, Making the Right Thing Happen, reading the text of the Yoruba Atlantic Altar. Another one where he wrote for Manny Vega, and Manuel Vega, Ashe para todo el mundo, Manuel Vega and his art. And this is really sums up who Bob Thompson is in one sense. This is Amamoyo. In the center is Alex Lasalle, who started Amamoyo. And he was one of the great drummers, but Amamoyo was one of the groups that helped revitalize Bomba in Puerto Rico and in New York City too. But I introduced Bob to Alex and Amamoyo, and they became the house band for Timothy Dwight College at Yale. So, and whenever they had a dignitary they were celebrating, he'd bring Amamoyo up to play and sing for them. On the right, you can see the scholar and artist Manuela Arsenillas with her son. Her son now, he was what, a few months old then, but he was now a junior in college studying African-American studies at American University too. And to give you another example of how these things keep cross-referencing themselves, the guy in the blue giving the V sign is Obainde Allende, a great drummer, one of the great bomba drummers from Puerto Rico. His father was also a great drummer. Marta put together a conference in Puerto Rico to celebrate the African culture of Puerto Rico. I was walking down the street with Alex, with Obalinde's father, a great drummer, Thompson, Marta, and Fukiao. And Obalinde's father turned to Thompson, looked at him and said, "Wait a minute, I know you from 50 years ago at the Palladium." So all of a sudden, it just came like full circle. We'd all known each other, worked together. All of a sudden, we realized that we've always been each other's reference for, like, at least in that case, 50 years. So, I mean,
And that was very important because Thompson was at the Palladium doing
right.
his work right in the 50s. And
Mm-hmm.
when Mongo Santa Maria, with Arsenio Rodriguez, and all of these musicians that were all founded, right, by the traditions, the sacred traditions of our people,
Yeah,
and have brought them to the stage.
yeah, but
And
the play,
Thompson was a participant in the mambo craze of the 50s of
well,
our
yeah,
community.
but the Palladium also ruined Thompson because at the time Thompson was in law school, and he flunked out of law school because he spent his time at the Palladium. And then that's when he became a art historian. That's when he decided to study what he really loved, African art and African art history too. So I'm just going to run through these so we can close out right now. Some of the Thompson's books are influential for everybody.
Kenny,
Probably
take
one,
your time. Take your time.
okay, probably one of the most influential books is this one, Flash of the Spirit. And it actually has been held against Bob for his life. People have hated him because the book has been so successful and people have loved the book so much. If you can buy it in a bookstore and then buy it in Botanica, it must be something wrong with it.
And I think to close, probably the most influential, um, if I had to say one thing, was the joy that Master T brought to learning and to the experiences of us as a people. Because generally everything was framed in terms of the negativity of it. And people like Thompson, Catherine Dunham, Zora Neale, right, understood the beauty and the celebration of us. And in that process, we were able to develop projects that were just at the time
But also
just groundbreaking and lovely.
Bernice Johnson Reagan, Barton.
She's another, yeah. And Silvia del Villar, there were so many that had that perspective, but never had a platform to show it. And I think that what we were able to do in that process was create a platform, our platform in our institution to celebrate it. So thank you for the moment.
Thank
Thank you,
you
Dan.
so much. Thank you to both of you. And of course, this is why we started the Robert Farris Thompson Maroon Institute as well, to have dialogues and to continue the work without having to seek permission or even without being funded, that we do it because we love to do it. And so it's incredible to hear of your, groundbreaking work and more of the actual process and really how hard it was as well. I feel that, that doesn't get talked about enough. And it's, such a powerful part of the process is being able to overcome that and deal with it. So without
Joy is important. If there's no joy in it, then it falls apart. And that was very important because we
yeah,
were able to overcome whatever because we loved doing what we did and do.
yeah. Right, right. And it also, I mean, it's just the reality as well. That's the issue too, is how things kind of get hijacked or distorted without any connection to the actual communities and the context. And so the realness of it is that's the medicine. That's where the medicine is, I think. Yeah.
No, I
Um,
agree. And I just want to say one thing
yeah.
in closing. At this moment in our history, in this moment in our history, where again, we're trying to be erased, where the narrative is trying to be destroyed, right? That joy and that insistence and that understanding of flash, that our humanity is what keeps us alive and what keeps it going, is critical at this time, because our babies, my granddaughters are not going to experience the joy if we don't make it happen.
And it's about the love. It's about the love. Yeah.
It's about the love.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And thank you, Danny. So I'd like to invite Adama to share her incredibly transcendent work with us and words with us. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for those presentations. I'm sitting there listening and I just feel so blessed right now because I'm in this space with Dr. Vega, who I've been looking at your work forever. When the spirit dance mambo, I mean, when I heard those words, and I told you before, when I was a high school teacher, how your work is what helped motivate children to understand who they were and inspire them to read and really see value in themselves. And I remember Danny, when I started at Columbia, and I was in a similar situation, you know, I was sitting there thinking, where am I going to find this research that connects, you know, the Yoruba to the world, the Mende to the world, like that thing, show how we are manifesting these ideas and this embodiment. And I remember Danny had a course that I could never fit into my schedule, and I wanted to go sit in his course. And I was like, this is exactly what I'm talking about. And when I was doing my research for the show at the Newark Museum of Art, and I came across Henry Drew's work, I said, oh my, I just fell in love with the idea of this work being alive. And I said, yes, the work is alive. And he did that amazing essay. And then you think about all of these connections to Dr. Thompson, right? And I just love like how being a part of that world, having the ideas, and then being connected in all of these different ways, because later on, Danny connects me to Dr. Vega, and I'm like, yes. And then, you know, knowing that all of this exists and you just being a part of this world, it just means so much. And I was sitting here taking notes as you all were presenting as well. You know, so it's just, yeah, just a joy and a blessing. And yes, we do have to keep humanity and the flash and the spirit alive. So I'm going to share my screen. I was doing research for my upcoming exhibitions last year, which was the Sao Paulo Biennial and the Utah Museum of Fine Arts. And my work was centering around Brazil as this place. First of all, with people who have known my practice, they were like, how have you not been to Brazil? So when the opportunity came to actually go to Brazil and do some research, I thought about, you know, I had to go to Bahia, first of all, just because of the aliveness and the culture and the just everything. And I thought a lot about Congo, you know, and thinking about Congo with the culture with a capital K, right? And I started thinking about patterning and Lukasa, like all of these different concepts. And the background is actually bodies that are making these patterns. And so I collaborated with an artist named Fanny Mpo, who I met in Congo. When I met her and I found out that she was a designer, I said, oh, when we get back to the States, remember, this is like a timeline. I had no idea I was going to meet her. And I said, I'm going to send you some textiles. And can you make something for me to wear that I'm going to perform in, that I'm going to use in these upcoming exhibitions? So this, what we're seeing behind, are the textiles that you'll see later. And that's how that all manifests. And the thing is, you start meeting the people that you need to meet in order to do the thing that you need to do. And it's this continuum. And even the dress, the what I'm wearing now, the robe in this photo, the blue one, is a similar collaboration with a artist, Marco Hall from Newark. And I just walked into my first couple of days doing my residency at Project for Empty Space. I walked into his shop and I said, do you want to collaborate with me? And he was like, well, maybe. He didn't know me from anywhere. And then a year later, it happened that my residency at Express Newark led us to a collaboration. And it was so beautiful. And from that came this idea of me being embodied in these ideas of ancestor and all of this beautiful cosmologies and ontologies that come from Africa, being robed in that is something that I'm thinking about as I'm designing these cloths to be wrapped in. So I'm gonna just take you a little bit into my practice. My work is deeply rooted and embodied in ancestral memory through my physical body, earth, spirit. In this image, my feet are grounded in the Waje River in Pujom, where my grandmother Adama Delphine Fawundu is from. I am wearing a dress that illustrates mami wata made from Gara fabric that my aunt Mary and my grandmother collaborated to hand dye. My grandmother was a Halemo. She was initiated into the Bondo Society, one of the oldest woman-led secret societies in West Africa. I only met my grandmother 2 times. And once when I was 4 and then again at 21. So the knowledge that I am looking for about, her embodied knowledge, it comes intuitively. And luckily I have the scholars like Dr. Sylvia Arden Boone, through her book Radiance from the Waters, who also studied under Dr. Thompson, to inform me of those missing pieces, or even to confirm the thing that I feel, so it's just so beautiful how that happens. So my artistic practice is a continuous awakening. My eyes are opening and I'm beginning to see. Each creation is connected to the next, and what it's about life, it's about humanity, and it's about how we connect to each other. We have this one earth that seems to be many different places, but at the end of the day it's one, and we all have our responsibilities based on where we are in order to connect and to keep this thing going in a way that is sustainable for us all. So I find myself in different parts of the world, grounding myself, whether it's in the waters or in the land, and with each other, to continue this message. And my flash of the spirit connection comes very interesting. I also was at Columbia in my studio doing my MFA, and I had a studio visit with a painter, Gregory Armanoff, who was a friend of Dr. Thompson. And I remember telling him the same thing, that I'm interested in these, how did people in the diaspora transform and shapeshift these Mende and Yoruba ontologies. And the next day, this book was at my studio door, and I cherished it from that day on. Next, like just about a week after, because all of this is during my first semester, I meet with Susanna Coffey, who's a painter, and she saw in my studio I had something that was almost like an altar. And on it was a textile that was hand dyed by my grandmother, Sawe masks. I had photos of myself as a baby, my parents being married, all some herbs. I had crystals, all of these things. And I just put it there because it was something that I needed to see every day that I entered that studio. And I was going to think about what I would be making work for, about, continuing. And because prior to that, I wasn't thinking about things in the same way that I was thinking about them. And Susanna, she goes into my room and she looks around and she says, "Have you read Radiance from the Waters from Sylvia Arden Boone?" And I said, "No." And she said, "You have to get that book." Literally within the same week, I meet with Dr. Kelly Jones because I had done a portrait of her, and I was going to, we were arranging so I could do a portrait of her. She had just bought one of my works. And I talked to her. She said, "So what are you doing here? What are your interests?" And I started telling her. She said, "Hold on." She went right off of her bookshelf and gave me this book. And I just was like, okay, here it is. This is where I am. This is where I'm supposed to be. And everything started to make sense. And it even continues. So a year later, I was invited to Yale by the African Students Organization to present about my work. And I had a conversation with James Green, who's a curator of African art from the Yale Museum. And I said, "Do you know Dr. Boone's work?" And, a week later, he was at a dinner with Vera Wells, who is the person who introduced Dr. Boone to Dr. Thompson. And he showed me her card, and it had a Salwe mask on it. And he said, look, you just mentioned her, right? And then so I immediately had a conversation with Dr. Wells, and she gave me the full story. I just felt so blessed. We were on the phone for about a good hour, and she was telling me all of this information, and it gets better. So once I got to Columbia, I started working there, and I saw that Dr. Zoe Struthers was doing a talk. And I was like, who's this? Let me email her so I could get to know her. I go and have lunch with Dr. Struthers, and the first words out of her mouth, as if she was in my brain, was she just started telling me a Dr. Bloom story. She told me her whole entire story, and I was almost in tears. And then, of course, she brings it back to Dr. Thompson, and I'm like, I am in the right place. I think sometimes we need those reminders that we are in the right place. We are on the path. We're doing what we're supposed to do. And I just felt so embraced. And I just feel like Dr. Boone is that ancestor that keeps nudging me and like, come on, let's go. And she's actually nudging me again because there's a whole bunch of work that I'm thinking about next that's all really embodying this amazing and important research and really pulling out what's in me that wants to speak to the world. So in 2022, I was invited to attend, to present these flags that would open up the way to the House of World Cultures in Berlin. And this was really my first performance. But when someone asks you to do something, you just say yes, and then you figure it out. And I invited my son, Che Buford, who you could hear on the violin. And I thought, if I'm going to present, and the curator of this event was Dr. Bonaventure Indikun, I said, if I'm going to do something, I'm going to think about those ancestors who resisted colonial rule by the Germans. And I did all of this research, and I was of course, referred to my text again and found symbols to create this space. And but I also wanted to create this space of connection to humans. So here I am having one-on-one moments with each person in that space. I think about sound. I think about how sound echoes in the trees and the grass and creates something that brings us together. And I'm inspired with the title of this, When the Spirits Dance, through you, Dr. Vega. Like, I'm telling you, you've been really much so influential in my work. And this brought tears to people's eyes, but it was this thing about how do we create these spaces that connect us to our humanity, to spirit, to earth. And I will go to the next one. I'm going to talk about a project. And the reason why I'm focusing on this one is because I realize that I have this way of making that thinks about this embodiment. And I'm using art as a way to create an archive and have this archive feed the next bodies of work. So this project, In the Face of History, started as a experiment where I use this photograph that you see called Here is Apolitical, because I'm like, listen, I'm tired of my body being politicized. This is a natural occurrence. We are, right? And so I started screen printing these images on documents. I started thinking about points in history that I was interested in, and then just did a whole bunch of screen prints on these documents. And it's inspired by my role as a teacher. I was a public school teacher for 10 years. And also me being a student. When I was younger, I was always introduced to all of this information about Africa that never made me feel good about it. And the revelation completely changed me as a human being when I would look for these facts that I would find that debunked all of those crazy violent myths. And so also when I would bring information into the classroom, my students would say, how come we never learned this? So I thought about that as I was creating this space. This exhibition that we're looking at was curated by Nyama Sandy, and it was this thing that made people walk in and look and ask questions about these different times and spaces in history. And so during the pandemic, I was asked to be a part of a a series of projects. My project was curated by Dr. Deborah Willis, and it was to commemorate, 100 years of women having the right to vote. So I decided to make tapestries. But then that didn't work because the pandemic happened. And then we had to do something digital. And so I decided that I would make a cape, and I started thinking again about the textiles, about embodiment, and a cape is something that you could use. But this project is also very much about the ancestors. And, that's why I think about Dr. Thompson's, something that he talks about often is going back, like this ancestral work that is so present here. What happened is Prospect Park, which is right where I grew up, and I'm starting to learn more and more through my research that where I was born and where I grew up is such ancestral and sacred land in terms of Africans who were enslaved here, but also had a certain level of embodied knowledge that contributed to the advancement of the Brooklyn that we know today. So I'm thinking a lot about that. And so this image is made in front of the Lefferts House, the historic Lefferts House, which I was thinking about as a document and this grounds as a document, but it was important to be in that space. And what happened is that I was actually asked by the people at Prospect Park. They saw the image that I made, and they asked me to be the first artist in residence there. So I said, if I'm going to be an artist in residence at this park, I want to really engage with the history of the Lefferts House. I collaborated with the historian there, Dylan Yeats, and he had the name of 25 people who were enslaved there and bios. So now we're talking about 25 people with histories, with stories, and I wanted to think about how do we do libations for these ancestors. I said, whatever I do in this space, when we open up, we're going to gather, we're going to pour water into the ground. I was raised pulling Sarah from our mother's tradition, where I always knew about the ancestors, that we have to show respect. And so each one of these tapestries are named after each person who was enslaved there. And when we opened the space, first of all, the space that I created on the porch, when you sit on the other side, this is what it looks like. And it's about being in that space and feeling, right? Understanding what it is that your body feels in that space. And I was so interested in how the wind will interact and create a new space, and how that will impact the people. So we gathered, we poured libation. Everyone participated in calling the names of each person. And I mean, now again, with me, I'm making new work. I made another image in front of the house, and this one is Ancestral Whispers at the Lefferts House. And here is my son and my mom. My mom was a part. This was the first time I performed with my mom. And now we have two, because we just did one at Cara. But having my mother and my son involved in this space is very important too. And so here is the libation and the calling of the names. And what was beautiful was now turning this over to the community. So the community was invited to make their own capes that were inspired by this project. Something that was really special is this young man, he found his way. I had an altar in the back, and he found his way to that altar. I had to take a picture of this. He sat there and he was just having a moment. He made a cross on his body and just sat there. And I said, look at the babies, no one told him to do that. And here is more from that event. And now I have a podcast that I'm going to release, and it's looking at Flora's story. Flora was one of the women who was enslaved there. When I spoke to the historian, the first question I asked him was, who was the healer amongst the people here? And he said Flora, without hesitation. And I'm reading this book called Medical Histories that talks about how it was the African people in Haiti who advanced the medical system, the French medical system, because they had knowledge and they understood how to come to that land and use what was there to do what they needed to do, and how they use that as a commodity. So I'm interested in Flora's story and how she actually did that there. And through this podcast, we're unpacking these stories. We're also using some critical fabulation as we talk about these stories as well. And um, I'm also interviewing healers in Brooklyn today who are carrying on this tradition. And I think that this is how we keep these stories alive, and we understand that we have that knowledge in our bodies. And when we acknowledge that, then we could connect to the land and do what we need to do, and to the spirit and the universe. Then I'll talk briefly about the two projects that I did last year that carried on into this year. One is it's called Vibrations from the Deep. And so I had the Sao Paulo Biennial, but I also had the Utah Museum. And once I understood I was going to be in these two places, I said, Utah, what's in Utah? The Great Salt Lake is there, right? And also there's the natural, I mean, when you talk about the beauty of what is Utah, you start to ask yourself about why we call this place America, right? Because you're talking about Navajo land. You're talking about all these different indigenous lands, spaces that were ushered and cared for. And that mountain had a name, you know, and a purpose, you know. So the lake has a purpose, you know. So I wanted to engage in that way, and I figured as I was doing research in Utah, I could also be doing research in Congo that's leading me to Brazil, and it will all make sense. So I started my year last year in January. I was in Congo, then I went to Nigeria, and I went to Ghana, then to Brazil. And I had been in Utah leading up to that. I went back to Utah, and all of this, I was collecting things. I was just everywhere collecting different materials that something that really stood out. And I call this mode of making that I've been doing poto patchwork. Poto meaning to gather and mende, and patchwork, of course, piecing different materials together. And I think about that as I make my videos, as I make my textiles, as I make everything. And some of these things that resonate, that calls me to it, are the gourds and the calabash. You know, I have calabash from so many different places, from Brazil, and you see how they change where they are, from Brazil, Congo, from Nigeria, from Ghana, you know, raffia and crystals, cowrie shells, healing herbs have become a very big, important part of my work, because I want, when I'm creating these environments, for people to feel it and for the space to be protected. So here is an example of one of the works that I did in Sao Paulo. There's a video piece, and this piece is called Vibrations from the Deep, and it's made from water sachets from Sierra Leone. I've been collecting them, and these sachets are the most affordable forms of clean water that you will get, that you could purchase. And I have been collecting them to remove them from the environment since 2022. So I had all of these in my studio. And so I thought, I'm going to create a space that people could go into, and even strangers they will have to form a circle around it, and they could be together. How do we bring people together? So the space includes like me stitching all of these things. They're photographs from Congo. There's herbs. You smell the cinnamon, the jasmine. You smell so much lavender, all of these things in the space. Yeah, it was something. And when I was doing the installation, the most beautiful thing happened. One of the installers actually practices Umbanda. And he said to me, he smelled the work. He said, "You're spiritual." He said, "This reminds me of my practice. This reminds me of my religion." And he said, "I just feel like I'm being embraced by the spirit when I'm in here." And he just loved working with me every day. And we had just the most beautiful moments. And it's interesting because at the last minute, I added the blue to the top because I wasn't satisfied with the way everything looked. And when I when I was in Bahia, I went to a Tejero, and one of the things that stood out was the way that the white fabric was hanging from the ceiling. And I was like, oh, the aesthetics of this place. Like, I just paid attention to all the detail. And it was when this thing went up, I said, oh, I know what we need to do. I know what we need to do to actually put the final piece on this place. And this is what came about. And people really, it really resonated with people. There's so much detail. There's so much to pay attention to. There are archives in here. There are textiles, some from my grandmother, some that I've collected. There are historical documents in here. There's so much in here. Some indigo dye, some cyanotype. You know, there's so many things in here. And here's some of the details. And one of the things that also came to me was this blue bottle. I don't know what, sometimes I don't know where I know where the ideas come from the spirit, right? But I was just like, before I even constructed this thing, I went to the lab and started drilling these holes in these tiny bottles. I was like, I'm going to use this in some way, shape, or form. I'm not sure how, but the blue, the cobalt blue, I was thinking about the cobalt in Congo and how that might, you know, what happens when that extraction happens, but how do we embrace the space with these bottles? Then it led me to the bottle trees. And so this is like a call to the bottle trees, to the protection of the space. And even though it's not hanging from a tree, the way it hangs in here, if you see it in person, it just feels like this light of protection that you're surrounded by. And it was that finishing touch that I hand sewed all of these with copper onto this piece. And which this brings me, and please tell me time wise, this brings me to my Utah exhibition. And with the Utah exhibition, this is the first time that I've made sewn textiles together at this scale. And so I will read you the names of these. So this one is number 2. It's called We, Blood, Air, and Water, Recycle Through Time's Endless Loop. Hear the rhythm, step forward for all of who came and all to come. And in here are you have the rivers, you have the Congo rivers, the Salt Lakes, like there's so much. I'm so into their pouches with herbs in it. There's so many details in there to feel and to feel embodied by. And here, this one is grounded Salt Lake. So this one was the background is a Salt Lake, feet grounded in the earth's deep core, head crowned by a galaxy of stars. She sees, you are me, I am you, we are countless, yet one. And I've also been very much inspired by Congo writing, the book Congo Writing and Other Narratives by Barbara Martinez Ruiz, who presented already and is also in this whole cosmos system. And this led me to make these prints. It's also a way for me to work with my hands. We were talking a lot, Danny, about the dark room and everything. And it just made me go back to this idea of printing in the dark room. So these are all silver gelatin prints with paint, I collect different seed chalks from around the space because I'm thinking about the ritual nature of that and the healing properties of it. So some of that is in here, whether it's Efun or Calabar chalk or Mabale chalk. Like I collect those too when I travel, and they are very prominent in these works. And the water bodies are they're always places of history. So you're seeing here, this is the water body in Miami, Virginia Key Beach, where people made space for leisure for themselves. When people were told that they could not have a beach, 1945, they created their own beach. And this is those waters. So I'm constantly immersing myself in waters of significance, in land of significance. And here are some more of those silver gelatin prints. These ones, this one has the Congo River in the back, and this is its own cosmology. And here's another one. This series is called Kala Sun, Sun of Vitality, and one is an ode to the Congo River. This one is an ode to the Mano River, and this one is an ode to the Great Salt Lake. And so this picture here was taken my time in Bahia. Oh my gosh. So we took a boat to this point of Yemaya's crossing. And the beautiful thing about being in this space is you could see the waters cover up to the point that you don't see the long bridge, and then you see them separate depending on where you are. And witnessing that, I can't even describe what it felt like. And here I am in the attire that was made by Fanny. And I'm going to leave you with a video. And because I had to share this video, because when I was at the Salt Lake, this is part of the video presentation by Vibrations from the Deep, I was surrounded by the brine flies. If you see, look in the background, there are billions of them. And they became like we're friends. Like I asked permission and I'm sitting there with them. And the most calming thing was hearing the buzz. You just hear this bzzz. It was just so beautiful to be embodied with them. I didn't know I did not expect this to happen, and I just embraced it when I was there. And here, so this video is a like this idea of poto patchwork, because we went from the Salt Lake, now we're in Brazil. And the collaboration is with my dear friend, where you'll hear her voice. Her name is Marta Vieira. She's 1/3 of the group Diggable Planet, and she's Brazilian.
Água de
And her
tartaruga.
voice,
Turtle water.
Água de
here
tartaruga.
she's reciting the
Turtle
Água de
water.
which is related to the Rwanda
Turtle
and called
Água de
water.
tartaruga.
way of life and spirituality. So I'll leave you here and that's it.
Virá, Congo, ô virolé. Teré, 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 Congo. Congo vem chegando. Olé. Teré, 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 Congo. Virá, Congo, ô virolé. Teré, 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 Congo. Congo vem chegando. Olé. Teré, 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 Congo. Água de tartaruga.
Turtle
Água
water.
de tartaruga.
Turtle
Água de
water.
tartaruga.
Turtle
Água de
water.
tartaruga. Virá, Congo, ô virolé. Teré, 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 Congo. Congo vem chegando. Olé. Teré, 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 Congo. Virá, Congo, ô virolé. Teré, 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 Congo. Congo vem chegando. Olé. Teré, 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 Congo. Do Congo, meu pai chegou. Papai, o quirombo gira. Samba, lele, o quirombo. O quirombo gira. Samba, lele, o quirombo. Povo da costa é povo bom. Ele é povo de Massada. Do Congo, meu pai chegou. Papai, o quirombo gira. Samba, lele, o quirombo. O quirombo gira. Samba, lele, o quirombo. Povo da costa é povo bom. Ele é povo de Massada.
That is it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
you.
Beautiful,
Thank
beautiful.
you.
Incredible. You have transported us. We are mesmerized. We're with the ancestors. Thank you so much for your really timeless work and for your generosity. Thank you for being
Thank
here.
you for having me and to just being a reflection. I'm so grateful.
Delphine, could you do me a favor? Could you talk a little bit about your family, particularly your grandfather?
Yes. So my grandfather and his father and family migrated from Cuba to Equatorial Guinea. And this is a early 1900 migration. But what I'm thinking, because just based on the documents that I'm looking at, his father must have come like late 1890s, because I see that document, and there was several trips. There was Equatorial Guinea, back to Cuba, and then back to Equatorial Guinea again. So he gave birth to my mom in Equatorial Guinea. And so she doesn't have those stories because he was actually in his 80s when he died, but she was 14. So, you know, that side of the family, we don't have so much information. So when I went to Cuba, like, so me, even in that video that you just saw, there are elements of Cuba in there, me at the water. And so it is kind of another place that I'm looking for answers. And, you know, sometimes it's in the water, it's in the energy, but yeah, it's a place of a point of more research for me. But that's his story, and he did business in Equatorial Guinea and in Freetown, and that's why my mother was raised in Freetown, because she was raised by her older sister. So he was very well known, very generous, had many children, right? But and so now I have like people who are my mother's age are really her nieces, my grandmas, you know. I mean, they've many of them have passed, but I grew up in this extended family with all these extra grandmas because of him, you know, in that lineage. Like, it's like I'm surrounded by so much. Every time I ask my mother about another uncle, oh yes, that's from the Valcarcel lineage, or auntie, you know. So
That makes a lot of sense too, because I was thinking and looking at your work how deeply Afro-diasporic it is. It's so African, but it's also referencing everything else you could possibly imagine, the Caribbean, Brazil, and all of these details. I was really, moved by that. And so this history it just makes so much sense. Yeah, yeah.
that's why it is. I feel like I come from this family that is literally from all of these different places. Even when I start to break it down from my grandmother's side, you know, we'll learn grandma's Mende, she's Mende. One day I'm having a conversation with my auntie. Oh, but you know, she was born in Guinea, right? I'm like, really? Okay, now here's another, you know, it's just like this movement. We've always been moving though, right? So
Mm.
it's very interesting.
But Delphine, there's also this aspect of you belonging to the People's Republic of Brooklyn. That
Yes,
your early start as a photographer was about hip hop.
yes.
Early work was all hip hop, yeah.
Yeah, and now I'm starting to see why I found so much like kinship in hip hop is because I was seeing the call and response, and you know, not knowing this, but being attracted, especially the early days of hip hop, you know, when you think about the formation of a hip hop piece, right? It's call and response. It's the sampling. It's all of these things that are in embedded. It's the gathering in a circle. It's the spinning and spinning and spinning with breakdancing. You know, all of these things that are a manifestation of these practices. Like, what was really interesting is when my grandmother, my grand aunt, actually, she was the last chief of Mano. When she passed away, they sent us videos of this masquerade. It wasn't it definitely wasn't solid, but it was more on the side, looking more like a Ngungun, but not really. Like, it just had raffia, every layers of raffia, and that thing kept spinning and spinning and spinning and spinning, and then it just fell flat, boom. And I must have watched that video at least 50 times, and it brought me joy each time I watched it, because there's this circle again, the spinning, the mysteriousness of the boom, that, you know. And it reminds me of when I went to Mono, and we were greeted by a big Nomoli that was doing this dance and everything. And I asked my uncle, I said, who's inside of there? And he just laughed. You know, so it's just, you know, that element, and just to see, you know, in hip hop language, I feel like it's another language form and another expression that if you just take it at its core, right? The way that it's constructed, it just goes right. It's the flash of the spirit, you know?
Mm.
So before I invite you, Adama and Dr. Vega, to dialogue together, I'd actually like to call on Dr. Drool because we would like to hear your thoughts. The collective we, the royal we, the spiritual we, all of us.
I don't think I should intervene. I should let Marta and Adama carry on because we have been surrounded by joy and the love of the work and the lives that they have led and are leading. Let it carry on. I don't want to interrupt that. Let it flow. Let that flash continue.
Well, all I have to say is that presentation was absolutely exquisite. Absolutely exquisite. And it brings me joy to use the word of joy and right and the importance of what we do for us and us as our children. Because you reminded me, Delphine, that I had spoken to your public school class, right? And the impact it had on a young man that was having some kind of difficulty, right? And how it transformed him. And all of our work, I think, is transformation because at the same time that we do it, we almost don't understand where that energy or where that vibe, where that flash comes from, right? Because the educational process has been so skewed, right? To use it, that we don't see ourselves in it. And the work that, I feel that we're doing makes us see what we should have been seeing all along, right? Being the children of the diaspora. So, I mean, we just did a celebration of water yesterday at Corredor Afro, where a group of artists honored Mami Water, right? And Yamaya, the ocean. And we did that in St. Croix.
Yeah.
And, the whole process and seeing it here in Puerto Rico, it's the same thing. It's a connection, it's an understanding, it's a spiritual connection and narrative that sometimes needs words and sometimes doesn't because it just feels, the feeling of it all is the language, right?
Right. And I do want to share this story like again about the impact because I think it's so important, especially where we are in our world and we think about our children and the child that you impacted back in 2000, this had to be around maybe 2006 or 7. We are leap years beyond that in terms of the war against our children, right? So the importance of reaching to the community is so important. And that story goes that, New York and America had and still has this thing about education and special education and Black boys, and they can't read and everything. And I worked in an all-boys school in the South Bronx, and I had so many students who were in high school reading on a 3rd grade level. And I had this one student who would get in trouble every day, always fighting everything. And he's somebody who could have been thrown out of school. And when you had that exhibition, it was called Santeria and Superheroes. Yes, I looked it up. I said, I'm taking these students, I'm taking them to go see. And it's interesting how you talked about how people were, saying, oh, that's double work, get that out of here. I took these young children to go see. Each of them chose an Orisha that they identified with. And this young man, he chose Shango. I'm telling you, for the rest of the school year, the minute he started, I said, Shango. He said, that's right. And the biggest smile came on his face. And he did so much better after that encounter. And imagine what happens when we actually full force go and take care of our children. Exactly. It's so necessary, so necessary. And that school that I worked in, it was called Urban Assembly for History and Citizenship of Young Men. Do you know they shut our school down with the kind of work that we were doing? They shut our school down. It no longer exists. So there's a war. There's an active war against our children They can't read today. They're addicted to the phones. And this AI that we were talking about before. So we have real work to do, and it starts right with the young ones that are right next to us.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that was the work of Edgardo Miranda. Yeah, when in informing the show, it was so important because he was doing superheroes, right?
Yes.
And we were telling him, but Edgardo, you have to do superheroes that look like us, And
Right.
so we got into this conversation, and he came out with imagery that was just amazing for all of the Orishas. So that show was a beautiful show, an amazing show. And you continue, to have that narrative for us.
Right.
And I think that one of the things that I feel that our work intentionally must do is make clear that there's a narrative, there's an aesthetic,
Right.
there is a language of color, there's a language of elements that are natural and surround us, that, provide that inspiration and the healing that we need. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
So I think that, seeing that water piece that you just did, and seeing what we did in St. Croix without any kind of narrative
Right.
between us, right? It's the same thing in different ways. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And it's reminding me that, we have to keep the work going. Like, if we're going to do it, the next generation has to do it. It doesn't end. It's a cycle that has to just continuous. It just has to keep going. Definitely. Definitely. Yeah. So
yes.
be thinking. Now, I want to get back to this conversation that we were having on the phone about AI and all of this, and after we got off the phone, I thought about ancestral intelligence. I'm going to borrow from Dr. I'm forgetting his name right now, but he said African intelligence, versus artificial intelligence. Please go back deep into what you said the Babalao told you when you asked about.
Well, we're thinking of this project, right? And I'm getting very, I don't know about anybody else, but anytime I open something, be it in the bank, be it information, they're forcing you to go onto an AI platform or an AI thing or whatever. And I've been getting very annoyed about it. So I've been talking to, our team and other people, and everybody's sort of saying it, and I said, well, maybe we should think about doing something public about it.
Right.
And I went to speak with a series of Babalaos on this, right? The keepers of the Ifa tradition. And I said, well, how do you feel about all of this conversation, right, on artificial intelligence? So, they all thought a minute, and then one of the elder Babalaos said, it doesn't bother me, because we have to understand and pass on the information that nothing functions without breath. I mean, ritual doesn't get ignited, right? It's just a bunch of objects until your breath touches them, right? And that's what makes it function. So without breath, you don't have life. And in a sense, and understanding, because now I'm deep sea diving in all of these, information things on AI. If you remove intelligence, if you remove life, the consequence is death without spirit, right? Because the machinery doesn't have spirit. Right. So yeah, so I was blown away by what they were saying, because it is in fact right. And you see now with some of the people who are developing these artificial intelligence platforms that are basically saying, well, at some point we'll be smarter than human beings, right? And then the question becomes, so do you need human beings? At what point do you stop needing human beings? At what point do you stop needing the breath?
Right.
Right? The flash. So that's a conversation, right? That we have to look at. Yeah.
Right. And one of the things that, sometimes I'm reflecting, and one of the things that I always want to remind us of is our breath, is our collective breath, is we're breathing with the waters, we're breathing with the trees, we're breathing with the birds, we're breathing with the ants, with everything, and that collectiveness. And it's like, what does that mean when people try to say, no, we can't? And so it then made me start thinking too about, this idea of manifestation and speaking things into existence, and how we have the power to create this world that and to continue in a way that we want it to be, without centering the things that we don't want. And just as that could be so active, we could be very active. And I keep reminding myself every day that that's my tune. You know what I mean? And also, after we spoke, I was reminded of my 21-year-old self. And I had a conversation with a friend of mine, Haji. He was running a hip hop magazine called Beat Down. And we were, this is like when they started talking about the information highway. And we said, it's going to be a fork. Then I started thinking about like this crossroads. And you're going to choose which way. Are you going this way or are you going that way? And then I'm now questioning, I'm like, what would my 21-year-old self say to this 54-year-old self about some of the choices that or where you are right now? What would that conversation mean? Because I was so aware, without actually knowing how this thing will be implemented, but I was so aware of what was coming and didn't understand how it was going to come. And I just remember that conversation so well, and even envisioning like this
the thing that becomes critical is, what information do we have? Because I
right.
went to a conference that was held in New Orleans for Black leaders of Black institutions, right?
Right.
And a sister, Rua Benjamin, from Princeton, made this presentation. And she showed this image of the people who are funding all of these platforms, right? All billionaires. None of them looking like us, right? And then I started sort of researching them and listening to them talk in different platforms. And at one point, one says, well, when the questioner asked him, or the moderator asked him, well, what do you see into the future? And he says, well, I know that I'm not going to exist forever, so this is a good experiment.
Wow.
Right? So it's almost like death is okay for me. Right? Because I know that I'm not going to live, so I'll invest in whatever I need to invest in to have fun watching it.
Unbelievable.
And then I'm saying, like, what is the conversation that we're bringing, right? Because that's why I went to the Babalao. I said, well, how do we feel about that? And he says, well, without life, without breath, what do we have?
Right.
Right. So that's what we have to guarantee for us in our future.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was fun. It's been fun deep sea diving into all of these conversations, because before I went, like I told you, my 8-year-old, I have an 8-year-old granddaughter, and she'll just pass by Alexis and make a comment, and Alexis responds. And I never took it further than that, as, oh, how cute, right? And it's not cute.
Right.
And in fact, when talking to my son, he removed it, because it was like, no, because then that stops your thinking, your intelligence, what is intelligence? But it's looking into things, going through the process of learning, going through the process of seeing the pros and the cons. So if you don't have to do that because your response is immediate, then what are you? What happens to your brain? What happens to your ori?
Right. Exactly. Exactly. And it's in our RE, our spirit is so rich, and this brain that we have could do so many things that we need to honor that and keep it
and feed it, not make it, go hungry.
right. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
So, Petra, what's up?
Yes, thank you so much. So I was wondering what your conversation was, so getting some snippets. Thank you. So I think that we can open it up to the Q&A from those of you that are here. So if you have a question for Dr. Vega or for Adama, please, we'd love to hear from you.
Petra, I would also like to invite one of the people in the audience to respond to.
Yeah.
Could Lowry Stokes Sims, could you please respond?
Hola, hola.
Sorry, I can't put my camera on because I'm in my Saturday mode here.
Hey,
I appreciate that.
Well, and I'm sorry I was late, Marta, but I've lived through so much with you and was privileged.
Oh, Laurushka, yeah, you were there from the
I
beginning,
was
girl.
there from the beginning. So, my sister and I have been having lots of conversations, particularly about the AI, and it's right. Everywhere you go, it's sort of like, like intervenes.
Mhm.
We read so much, like in the press about the epidemic of depression, loneliness, isolation that people are experiencing. And my sister, my sister's much more confident about human beings and AI than I am. And I keep saying to her, but Benna, we've seen the movies. I said, do you remember Terminator when the machines became conscious? And it reminds me so much of a lot of reading that I've been doing about what the nature of intelligence. My book club here at my condo, we just read a thing called The Light Eaters, which is talking about intelligence in plants. And one of the interesting things is um, uh, one of the researchers that were discussed in the book, many of them have problems thinking that plants have intelligence because they don't have a physical brain. And I said, but the brain is only an organ that functions on electricity and different currents. So, it's not the mass of the brain that works, it's the electrical currents that somehow come into force when we were born. And so, a friend, and so I have all these friends sending me this stuff, like there's this whole thing now about the fungal, network throughout the plants, like with everything. And he brings us back to what Adama and what Marta has talked about, Adama and Marta have talked about in terms of our relationship to nature. And I think that one of the things about this kind of computerized age is that it is pulling us away from that relationship with nature. And I remember, like after I read The Light Eaters, I have these incredible plants that have grown in my condo because I have a northwest exposure on the 10th floor, which I never could grow in New York. I live in Baltimore now. And so I had a conversation with the plants. I said, now look, don't start no crap here, just because I know that you guys are watching and talking. And it was interesting because I took some plants that were mother and sort of children plants and put them back together, and now they're flourishing, so much. So it's I just think that the importance of this kind of relationship that we all need to have back to our African roots is really about us reconnecting with nature, with the forces of nature, and having respect for us. And also realizing, as Marta said, that if you give it up to a machine, you lose your ability to sort of imagine, create, and move forward. Is that okay, Danny?
Danny there.
yeah, that's great. That's actually why I asked you to speak. When they heard what you had to say.
Thanks, Danny.
Yeah, thank you.
Well,
That,
I think as Delphine was saying, I mean, in all of our rituals, right? We whether official ritual, sacred, or everyday life. I mean, our food is so grounded in vegetable plants, right? In things that are vegetable, right? Aquí en Puerto Rico, and with the advent of, the United States sort of blocking are people getting what they need and really trying to destroy farming, the sickness rate has increased. And that is everywhere that we have been basically an architectural people. you know, dealing with plants. And in our rituals, if plants aren't there, you don't have the ritual,
Right.
right? You need that element of life to be present in order to activate.
I think just related to what you're saying, Martha, I mean, we really have to sort of really be conscious of our food supply.
Right.
Because I mean, one of the funniest and most telling things that I've heard in a long time was Leslie Jones on the Daily Show, and this was a couple of years ago when the Olympics were in Paris, and I happened to be in France because my sister was having back surgery, and she was talking about, well, I went to France, and she says, it's interesting how you have different foods over there. Now, when you eat these foods in France, they have 4 ingredients. When you eat the foods over here in the United States, they have 15.
Right.
So all of the kinds of additives that are being does, I mean, I have to sort of seek out a new source of chicken because I eat chicken now that I cook and it doesn't taste like chicken, and I'm thinking I'm getting old and my taste buds are dying or something, And so I think that the whole thing about nourishing, because you need to nourish yourself, and the source of our foods and how it's being manipulated by large corporations is really something that, seems political and economic, but is also very spiritual.
It really is. Yeah. Thank you for that. It's something that when I was teaching in middle school, we did a whole curriculum around food so that young people could understand what they were putting in their bodies. And one of the things, just even in doing that research, is the attack on farms, the monocrops, that they're feeding to the animals that in turn eat that and end up with cancer. It's a whole thing. And something that you notice is that regardless of who's running for president, you rarely hear them talk food politics, right? Maybe somebody might whisper a certain thing, but going in depth into the one thing that we know we need to sustain ourselves is food. There's a war against farmers. There is an absolute war against farmers. And, they would like to control all of the food. And I think it's so important when you think about food sources and our waterways too, right? Like how often are we thinking about the Hudson River as a place that sustained New York City, and now it's so polluted that doesn't even make any sense, or even some of the, my studio is now in Gowanus, and that Gowanus canal is so disgustingly polluted that I was thinking about, what's in this water? Just touching that water could cause cancer. Like, imagine. So they're of course trying to clean it up now, but it also brings me to the idea, going back to these ideas of colonialism that told us that we were, savages and all of that stuff, and how that is a direct impact on where we are with our environment and everything. So it's this idea of not only colonizing people, but colonizing the ideas of how we relate to land, and which leaves us in this ridiculous state in our environment now, and that everything is interconnected. And It's the undoing of that we really have to be hyper aware of, I believe.
Yeah, I started the conversation, right? That we'd have no water here in Loíza.
Yeah.
It rains every day. We have no water. And the whole area, right? Even the tourist area, they're getting trucks of water, right? Being brought in. Obviously, we're in the rural area, right? In the Black area. So we have to go get our water. We have to go buy our water. So, this whole dynamic of what's happening with the sources that give us life,
right,
is something that we need to, keep centered. And I think that through the traditions that we have been able to sustain intentionally, because I would say candomblé in Brazil, lucumí in Cuba, that's intentional because with the conditions our countries are in, it's easier to let them go than to sustain them.
right,
And we have chosen to sustain them because we know they work.
right.
So that the work that we do, right, and all of us do in terms of doing public work has to assure our people that we're on the right track, right? That is the right thing to do. It has been done, and we will continue to do it. It's their responsibility to continue, you know. So yeah.
And I think it was
So,
Bob that
go
called them
ahead.
the medicines of the gods, right? Everything that we use, everything that we interact with, this is what brings that flash. It brings breath, it brings life, it brings spirit.
Right.
It's the medicine that we're misusing.
Absolutely. Yes, I agree, Catherine, who's saying that in the 60s we used to say you are what you eat. Absolutely.
I wonder if we could get Raquel. Raquel, I think this might be your first visit here. Could you contribute, please? Raquel Pinder Hughes? Hello?
You're muted, Rekha.
Hi, everybody. I'm taking care of my two babies, 3 and 4 years old. I would just say that I think it's very inspiring for them to be able to hear and see the work that has been presented today. You could see, if you were able to see their faces, that they were very engaged. And it's very inspiring and beautiful to know that they have these role models. By way of introduction, I was one of the people who grew up with Robert and with the Studio Museum of Harlem.
What a cutie. Oh.
So just really to hear what you all have to say, and it resonates very deeply with me.
Thank you for sharing with the babies.
Yes.
Oh, you're so beautiful.
Gabriella said she loved the video.
Oh, thank you.
Just Ari? Yeah, it's wonderful for them to be able to see this work. And of course, we take them to everything we can, but to see it, coming from the people who have created the work, it's very important, I think. And Marta, thank you for all your decades of contribution to my life, and growing up in New York City, your work was so important. So
thank you.
I knew Robert very well, so it's beautiful to be part of this. I came to this group through John Santos, who's to the work, knowing that I was very close to Robert. So happy to be here.
Thank you.
So nice to meet you, Raquel. I'm really
Raquel, are you
Yes, I am.
Yes, I know. To John?
Yes, John is my cousin-in-law, my husband's cousin.
Right. I grew up with him in Newark.
Yes, and George knows him very well too. A lot of all the Pinder users are part of the same family, so we're all.
I know. When I saw Pinder users, I said, yes, I know.
Yeah, very honored to be part of the family.
Okay, so I have to tell John that I met you.
Yes.
Beautiful.
So I actually have a question for Adama. I'm wondering about your process, because your work is so spirit guided. I wonder if dreams or any kind of channeling is a part of your process of because in a way you're materializing, whether it's through performance or photography or the sculptures and spaces that you create, you're physically manifesting these intangible realities.
Yes.
So I'm wondering if you could share a little bit more about your process. Yeah.
Yes. The process comes a lot from listening and allowing my body to move and do what it does. So I can't plan things too much. Like, you can't tell me, oh, produce 10 of these by this. It's just not going to happen, and honestly, like, sometimes I get a little nervous because, like, I might have something that's coming up and I can't just rush to it. I have to let it come through. Like, I have to let it come out. And if I try to plan and say, I'm going to do this, like, I had no idea some of those pieces were going to be exactly what they were going to be. I have to just let the moment happen, and even sometimes I'll start one way, then it'll go another way. So I guess guided by intuition is definitely a real part of my practice I trust. Because even when if I try to do the thing, like, where you say, oh, it's going to be, it never works. Like, that's not it. So it's really the listening, even going to places and just sitting with the land, or just like really immersing my body into the waters and seeing what comes from that is the way. Yeah, I'm trusting. Yeah.
You're on ancestral time. That in a way,
Yes.
your answer brings up like this issue of time that goes along with the conversation that we've been having, I think, about the crisis of spirituality in Western culture or a capitalist system, that then everything else starts to collapse because things are interpreted in this materialistic linear way, right? When in reality, they are not that. Right.
Exactly.
So you're on African time, you're on spirit time.
Absolutely.
And it's not linear.
It's not at all.
Not
It's
linear.
not at all.
Yeah.
No, and dreams are a big part of it. I
I
feel like,
know.
I haven't been in my studio in a while, but those things are just like so many things are happening in here. And I'm just taking notes. And when
Yeah.
I go, even though I think I'm going to start doing something when I get there, it might do something else. So I just listen, and it's just exciting. And that's why I love the text, because sometimes I'm like, why am I thinking about this? And then I'll go and look at the book. And I'll go, yes, exactly. You know what I mean? So
Yeah, affirmation. He
yeah,
said, I'm on the right track. I'm okay.
exactly.
I didn't go too far off.
Exactly.
Right.
That's a
Okay.
blessing.
Yeah.
I'm going to use my role as a caller and ask George Preston to contribute.
So all of this reminds me of continuity, images, and the people, past, present, future. And a couple of weeks ago, I mentioned this ancient Greco-Roman conversation. Are images the same as the people? Is the image of the emperor the emperor? And one of them says the image and the emperor are the same. Neither is glory divided. So, Adama, you are providing us with an altar for our souls, through which the past, present, and future of the single grains that produce 1,000 grains that we are. Amen.
Oh, wow. That's so
George, I have one question for you,
George.
George.
Woo!
Promise I won't give you a long-ass answer.
George, I have one question for you. Why is all my African art in your wall? Could you please let me know?
Because it comes to me. It comes to me.
Just give it back. Just give it back. That's all I want.
Yeah, George, return the goods.
Let me give you an example. Wednesday, I come out of the Metropolitan Museum, and we want to go uptown. And there's this queue of taxis, and I say to myself, I can't get on this queue, and even when I get on the queue, the taxi has to go south and it can't make a turn until 79th Street. I get out and I decide I'm going to flag a car down. I walk out into Fifth Avenue and I start walking north, and I see a taxi. I get into the taxi and I eyeball this driver, and he kind of has a Fonty. I'm answering your question. He has a kind of Fonty aura about him. So I say to him, asafa kwanyu mfasika sikambra. And he says, well, I'm not Fonty, and my Fonty is very poor. He says, but I speak Tree. So I said, where are you from? He says, I'm from Mampang Mamfi. Mampang Mamfi, as you know, Petra. Mampang, Amanokram, and what is the next village? Mamfi, where I'm the Abuafahini. Then the driver says to me, you know, you look kind of familiar to me. I mean, your face is kind of familiar. He says, do you have a son named John? I said, yes. He says, he's my friend. Kwame John Preston. He gets on the phone, calls up my son, and the three of us make the connection. That's why these pieces are standing behind me, Daniel Dawson.
Thank you, thank you. Well, I wish I had another request as eloquent as that, but I don't, so
And you are one of the people who comes here and can do anything and talk with them any way you want.
Wonderful. I'll see you soon, too. I'd like one more request to, could we have a Manding culture? Dr. Kenneth Dosser, could you please contribute to our conversation?
Sure. I just want to thank everybody for your inspiration. All of you. For those who don't know me very well, I'm a visiting professor at the Federal University of Bahia, and I've been blessed to go into my third-year contract here. I remember when the Caribbean Cultural Center did their first World Conference on Orisha tradition, and I saw one of their pamphlets, and it struck me so deeply that I had to get on a bus from Philadelphia, come up to New York, and go to the Caribbean Cultural Center and see what this was. Long story short, there was a time, well, there's another step in there. The second Orisha conference was in Bahia. And so I leave Philadelphia, hop on the airplane, and who walks down the aisle and sits in a seat next to me but Dan Dawson? And next to him was Charles Abrams. And that has created a wonderful brotherhood. Long story short, back to the other piece, having met Marta at the second Orisha conference, for some reason or other, she asked me to do some work for the conference because I had been to Brazil first, and I fooled people thinking that I could really speak the language and I knew my way around in the city. And Daniel knows I don't know all that. Hank knows the same thing. And eventually, Marta brought me on at the center as an assistant, and I did some writing for her. And it was when I left that position, I cried. I cried as I walked down the steps out to the street. But that position and your friendships and the work that you've done, and Bob Thompson, have been my stepping stones to here. And I don't take any of that for granted. As we talk about artificial intelligence, and I ride around Salvador with its 3 million people, and I see these buildings that are built out of red mud clay stones with corrugated roofs. I wonder, what is the future for the children that grow up in these buildings? And I remember I do tours as well, and some wealthy African Americans wanted a tour, and so I can do that. But they're really grounded tours, and they asked me, "Oh, can we go to the favelas?" And I kind of had a sickening response because there are no favelas in Salvador. There are people who are poor, but it's not a favela. The big problem here is people who can't make money legally and they get involved in drug trafficking. So my question in terms of for us as well as AI is, on the space station, will we have sacrifice and herbs? Think about that. Because space stations are coming, right? How do we maintain the traditions in this new? We have to have that kind of vision, right? We just can't say, well, okay, let's do this. Let's do an odd move. Are these implements going to be available? Because if Trump can't mention Juneteenth on Juneteenth, one of the things they're going to come after is this terms of doing Ademo and Ebo. So everyone, thank you again. Oh, one more thing. Danny will understand this really, really well. So Danny, I go to the academy today to see the Hoda, and Valmir's sons, I think, are the best capoeiristas on the planet, right? And they didn't have class. They didn't have the Hoda. They had Birimbau lessons. And not his youngest son, his second youngest son, Adujane, sat down after class was over and started talking about spirituality. Then he doesn't know Fukiao. Everything he said sounded like Dr. Fukiao. The circle, the language, this whole idea of having your eyes closed until you're initiated, and then your eyes are open, and how being in the circle of capoeira is an initiation, and you begin to see things that you typically a capoeirista sees that other folks don't see. That was just a beautiful day, and then to come here and be with y'all, woo! Amen.
Hey.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Are you working with Professor Isabel Fiera?
No, I'm in the Milton Santos Institute for Humanities, Arts, and Sciences in Orangina.
Okay.
And I teach humanities to graduate students who are working on their masters and PhDs, majority of which are African descended, brilliant students. Our resources are low, but these young folks are inspiration.
That's beautiful.
I just wanted to add one thing about the AI situation. I was thinking about Tembe Mandupe, who did a program called Cosmic Africa years ago. And he really demonstrated how the Dogon, the San people in Egypt, had it all. And there's one other memoir, I can't remember, but it was a memoir of an African guy came back after being Christianized and taught in England to be initiated at a large age. And the way he described his experience of moving from childhood to adulthood was like describing the opening of a vortex. So right within, I think, the writings and the beliefs of Africa, we have something more powerful than AI.
Thank you.
Yvonne, you were...
Hi. I think that one of the things that is necessary, and as I mentioned, the conference I went to in New Orleans, the information that we have, right, for the general public, for the general community, is lacking. It really is, because I think that I'm relatively, pretty well read and so on and so forth. And the narrative that you hear in the public about AI, and the narrative that what is happening is two worlds apart. And we're not sharing what's really happening with our communities at the level that we need to. If you have the conversation of maybe Alexa talking, or what is it, that robot that cleans in your house or something, But the fact that you have all of these centers that are developing, that are usurping the water, that the data centers, right? I think now people are beginning to realize that the destruction of what it means to water, what it means to electricity, what it means to their daily, because many data centers are taking so much power that the general lighting systems cannot support having a data center and servicing homes. So they're making a choice to service the data centers as opposed to people's homes, right, for the income. So I think that our work has to provide information that it's now not providing, right? And given that there's a system of blocking information, of the press not giving information, the question of how I think art is the way of getting out the information, that creativity is the way of getting out the information. You know what I'm saying? In any form, in any way necessary, because we're not getting it through public media because it's already censored. And anybody who talks gets gets taken off the air or blocked or whatever. So I think there's a conversation that began, at least I began to understand. I can't talk about other people. When I went to the conference in New Orleans, that speaks to a level of understanding that we need to have at the minimum in order to understand what is happening to us and what the future looks like. Because with that information, then you can impact the future, then you can plan, right? But we're not even getting that information so that we can realistically plan in a way that would make sense. I'm sorry, I know you weren't gonna.
I think Raquel and Yvonne had something to say too.
I just wanted to say thank you for today. Am I talking over someone?
No, go ahead.
Okay. Just quickly, in the words of Robert Farris Thompson and my relationship with him, I bend my knees to you today. I bend my knees to Danny Dawson and to Petra for having these kinds of conversations and for these meetings. Let's see. I needed to say that this is the first time I had a chance to really see and talk to Marta Moreno Vega, who I admired from the Caribbean Cultural Center with Danny Dawson. I came back, I was born and raised in Harlem in the Bronx, but I went to California early on, married at 17 and kind of became a Californian. And so my contact with the East Coast has been limited. But I met Robert Farris Thompson at a Yale alum panel, and there were three people. Albert Rabateau was on the panel as well, and everybody gave these really erudite talks and moving talks also. But when Robert Farris Thompson, he was the fourth one on the panel, when he began to talk, he pulled three drums in front of him and he played the drums first. And then he gave this incredible presentation. Anyway, I'm going into too many things. I wanted to say goodbye and just say thank you. But I have to tell you that he told, at that time, I kept asking him questions that they made me sit down and say they're going to have drinks afterwards. But he put me in contact with what was going on in New York. And I said, I'm from New York, but I got to get back into school. I got to find out some more things. And today, Adama's talk and her voice and her breath as she got excited about describing her process, all of that is about what this salon is really about. I can see the identification of everyone is interested in our African-rooted cultures, and the prospect of a future without it is frightening. But I don't have that fear. I don't have that fear. I don't know whether it's age that has put me in this secure place, or not. But I know that African-rooted culture is going to continue. Last thing, inside the river, there's a deep current. You can drop things on the shore and things get created. They can be improvised, they can be distorted, but they can never take away the current that's in the center. That deep center is our African-rooted culture and our inspiration. And today has been that inspiration to me and my students. I recommend, I want to have more people at these conversations. I want Isaura Oliveira here there. I want Colette Elroy. I want some of the students that I know have not, they've read material, but they haven't had these kinds of connections and support. So I thank you. My knees are bent today in honor of today's presentations. And thank you, thank you, thank you. Sorry for all the connections, but anyway, they're just thoughts going all through my head. Thank you again.
Yvonne, you know, it's funny. We met Izara at Martha's conference in '83. She was at the conference.
Wow, beautiful.
Thank you so much, Yvonne. Always amazing to hear from you. So just by way of concluding, our next online salon is on Saturday, July 18th. And it will be Will Calhoun, innovative drummer, but also scholar very much in his own right, with Zimbabwean graphic designer Saki Mafundikwa. And Will's talk is titled Holographica, Sound, Space, and the Fabric of Reality. And Saki's talk is Explosion of Writing Systems and Typography in Africa with a K. So that is Saturday, July 18, 1 to 3 p.m. Eastern Time. You can check us out at www.rftmi.org. We accept donations, we have merch. And I just wanted to conclude by saying, why do we do it? For the love. How do we do it? By any means necessary. So please spread the word. And huge thank you to Dr. Marta Moreno Vega for being here, and this beautiful synergy with Adama Delphine Fawundu, this gorgeous conversation, really bringing kind of a sacred feminine energy that is very much appreciated by everybody. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Petra.
And Marta, what are you working on? Where can people find you? And the same for you, Adama. Are there exhibitions, anything that you like for the folks to know about or to support?
Well, when I came to write, and somehow I built another institution, the Corredor Afro in Piñones. It's in a Black community, a Black maroon community, historically, a community of runaway enslaved Africans from different areas of the Caribbean as well as of Puerto Rico. And it's 7 years old now. And as I mentioned before, the exhibition that's on view now is entitled Sacred Waters. So that's why I was saying that Delphine and I are connecting in the same. And it's an exhibition of diverse artists who are looking at the sacredness of water in their imagery. And that's the project that's on now. Yeah.
Can I come visit you, Dr. Vega?
Of course, you have a home here. You know you do.
I just put a book out. It's called Praise House. And it's the journey through photographs of all of these different places, and it's now looking at the photographs, and when you look at them, you see how we shape community through our spirit. So even in a storefront or it's all those things that I paid attention to among throughout the years with my camera. And what was really significant is that I edited the book in 2020, and after looking at everything, there was some speck of blue in almost every picture. And I'm like, how is this possible? But so I'll share that with you. And then I have a show at the Ford Foundation that will open, I believe, at the end of August. But I'll share that out. Yeah, and just
You didn't tell us about your work in Berlin. You're going to Berlin right now, right?
oh yes, I'm a part of a conference around the planetary, something similar, like what do we do? Like in it's gonna be at Lufana University, and I will be there from June 30th to the 1st. So I'll be presenting somewhat like this. Yeah. So I'm excited.
Wonderful. All right. Well, thank you everybody for being here. We look forward to July 18th. Thank you, Danny. Thank you, Henry. Everybody. Blessings, love. See you next time. Thank you so much.
Thank you
Bye-bye,
all.
Petra. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.